Misachas Yevamos Daf Yud Test continues the Gemara's analysis of the opinion of Rabbi Shimon in the sugya of Eishes Achshel Haya Ba'olamo. The Gemara is trying to figure out which case of Shimon actually argues on the Chachamim about. This also gets into the sugya of Zika. Is there a Zika halacha that is considered like the Zikuka is married to the Yavam, or is there no Zika? So let's explain, give a brief introduction, and show what this machlokes is about. So first of all, the concept of Zika. Zika is the connection that a woman belonging to Yavam has to her Yavam, the man who's supposed to do Yavam with her. The Gemara has considered whether do we say Yesh Zika, that Zika is considered in some ways like they're already married, and it creates certain halachic connections between them that are similar to a marriage relationship. Or do we say Ain Zika and there is no marriage relationship, there is no connection there that's significant? Now, some halachas that might be dependent on this connection would be, for example, the sister of the skuka, the mother of the skuka. If there's a connection there, then the sister, the mother, would be aser to the yavam. In similar situations like that. The Gemara is also discussing Eishes Achshel Haya Ba'olamo. Now that's our main topic. Eishes Achshel Haya Ba'olamo, again, is a brother who was born after the death of the original brother. So, example, Ruvain, who was married to a woman and he died without children, and then Levi is born after he dies. Levi is in Eishes Achshel Haya Ba'olamo. Levi is not allowed to marry, not allowed to do Yibam with Ruvain's wife, even though he's Ruvain's brother, because they were not alive at the same time. The Gemara has already said that is a classic example of Eishes Achshel Haya Ba'olamo. Now the Gemara discusses what happens if there are three brothers, Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Reuven died without children, Shimon did Yibam, and Levi was born after the death of Reuven. The question, of course, is when was Levi born? Was he born before Shimon did Yibam or after Shimon did Yibam? Now we have, in this case of the three brothers, we have a machlokes between Rabbi Shimon and the Chachamim. The Chachamim say in both cases whether Shimon was born, whether Shimon did Yibam before Levi was born, or Levi did Yibam after Shimon, or Levi was born before Shimon did Yibam, whichever happened first, the birth of Levi or the Yibam of Shimon. In either case, Levi's in Eishes Achshel Haya Ba'olamo, and if Shimon then dies, then the woman who came from Reuven to Shimon and now is falling from Shimon to Levi is forbidden. She's in Eishes Achshel Haya Ba'olamo and she patters the tzara. That's the Rabbanah's opinion. That's clear. We have two Mishnayos. One lays out, the first Mishnah in the Perek lays out the case where Levi is born before the Yibam of Shimon. The second case, which is our most recent Mishnah, discusses where Levi is born after the Yibam of Shimon. Now the question is, where does Rav Shimon argue? Rav Shimon says in one of these cases, or possibly both of them, Rav Shimon says that Levi is not in Eishes Achshel Haya Ba'olamo, and Levi is allowed to do Yibam to the woman who was originally married to Reuven and then fell to Shimon. The question is, does he argue in both cases and only in one? Now we know in the case where Levi was born after Shimon did Yibam, that's the more lenient case, and it makes much more sense for Rabbi Shimon to argue there and say that there is no Isser of Eishes Achshel Haya Ba'olamo, and that's simply because there was never any Zika between Reuven's wife and Levi that was forbidden. The concept of Eishes Achshel Haya Ba'olamo is generally dependent on there being a Zika that's frustrated. That is, there is a marriage, there is a obligation to do Yibam, and that can't be done because of the relationship. That's what creates the Isser, and that Isser could outlast any further Yibams or other things that happen. So in the case where Reuven dies, then Shimon does Yibam, and then Levi is born, the woman was never had any Zika to Levi. She was already married fully to Shimon by the time Levi was born, and therefore there is no frustrated Yibam, there is no Yibam connection at all between this woman and Levi, and it is more likely that she is not considered an Eishes Achshel Haya Ba'olamo, and if Shimon were then to die, she would be allowed to go do Yibam with Levi. That is the case where Rabbi Shimon for sure argues. The question is, does he also argue in the case where Shimon did Yibam after the birth of Levi? That is, Levi was born while there was an existing Zika, before Shimon ever did Yibam. Reuven's wife was still available. There was a Zika on her to marry the brothers of Reuven, and Levi is born then. And Levi can't do Yibam because he was never alive in the same time as Reuven. He's an Eishes Achshel Haya Ba'olamo. That should create an Isser which continues. So we have a machlokes between Rav Oshi and Rav Papa. Does Rav Shimon argue in this case or not? And the Gemara is first going to analyze Rav Oshi at length and then go to Rav Papa. Now, Rav Oshi says, yes, Rabbi Shimon argues in this case as well. Rabbi Shimon says that there is no situation of Eshazach Shalo Haya Ba'olama here, even though the Zika still exists and Levi can't do the Yibum, and no Yibum has been done yet, there is no Eshazach Shalo Haya Ba'olama, and if Shimon does Yibum and then he dies, Levi can go ahead and do Yibum. It's not also because of Eshazach Shalo Haya Ba'olama. And the reason the Gemara proposes is because of the halacha called Yesh Zika. That is, we say that there was a connection between the woman and Shimon before Levi was ever born. There was a Zika between her and Shimon before Levi ever came on scene. That Zika is considered to be, like, in a sense, they're already married, and therefore she's Shimon's wife, and Ruvain, she's Shimon's kind of wife, and when Ruvain comes, and he comes on the scene, and he's born, he doesn't meet a woman with the Zika. She's already has the Zika, pre-existing his Zika. She already has the Zika to Shimon, and that's considered like she's already married to Shimon, and therefore there's no issue. There's no connection, there's no frustrated Zika to Levi. That's what the Gemara wants to propose. Now the Gemara's question, and this we saw yesterday already, the Gemara's problem is that we see a case where Rabbi Shimon, whose opinion we're analyzing here, Rabbi Shimon holds that even if Shimon went and did Maimer, that is, he did Kedushin, which is a quasi-marriage, still Rabbi Shimon is misapik. He's unsure whether there's considered to be a good enough connection between Shimon and the woman that would block the Eishes Achshel Hoyabalomo status of Levi. And the Gemara goes into that case to analyze, does this make sense, and how could we possibly work it out with what we're saying over here so far? So the Gemara quoted that case. Where do we see that? So the Gemara says the case is where you have Ruvain, who dies without children. Ruvain's wife falls to Yibum to Shimon. Shimon does Maimer, that is Kiddushin. Shimon has another wife, and then Shimon dies, and both of those two women fall to Yibum to Levi. Now here we're talking about where Levi was an Eshzach Shehoya Balama. He was born the entire time. He existed the same time as Ruvain. That's not the issue over here. The question is, what is the halacha of Shimon's original wife falling to Yibum to Levi, and Ruvain's former wife, who's now Shimon's Maimer wife, falling to Yibum to Levi? So the Tanakama over there views it as a quasi-marriage, and he says that Ruvain's wife is quasi-married to Shimon, therefore there is a Zika from Ruvain to Levi, because there's only a quasi-end to that Zika, and there is a Zika from Shimon to Levi, because there's a quasi-marriage there, therefore there's two Zikas at once, coming from Ruvain and from Shimon to Levi. That's a forbidden situation. You cannot have two Zikas at once from two different men, and therefore she's forbidden to marry Levi, and her tzara would also be because she is the tzara in that situation. Now, Rabbi Shimon disagrees with this entire analysis, and Rabbi Shimon says he's allowed to do Yibum to whichever one he wants, or Chalitza to whichever one he wants. And the reason is he analyzes Maimer in a different way than the Tanakama. The Tanakama views it as a quasi-marriage. Rabbi Shimon views it as a suffix marriage. It's either a full-fledged marriage to Shimon, or it's a zero marriage to Shimon. It's no half and half. Either way, he's allowed to do Yibum. And the reason is as follows. If it's a full-fledged marriage to Shimon, so then Shimon is married to both of these women, and when Shimon dies, they both fall to Yibum to Levi, and there's no problem. He can choose whichever one he wants to do Yibum to, and the other is pater completely. If, however, it's a zero marriage to Shimon, so then you have Ruvain's wife falling to Levi from Ruvain directly without any intervention of Shimon, and you have Shimon's wife falling to Yibum directly to Levi, and he could therefore do Yibum to both of them. Now, what he should do then is go do Yibum to Ruvain's wife, and that's fine. However, Shimon's wife, he now has to do Chalitza. He cannot do Yibum because it's possible that they're both Shimon's wife, and therefore he cannot do Yibum to two wives of the same man. He also cannot let her off with nothing because it's possible that the two Yibum fallers are separate, one from Reuven and one from Shimon, and therefore she's obligated in Yibum independently of Reuven's wife, and therefore she has to have a complete Yibum or Chalitza. So therefore he has to do a Chalitza. He cannot let her off with nothing, and he cannot do Yibum to both of them. But what we see from there is the halacha of Zika is a suffix, and that's Zika where he went ahead and did Maimer. So there's even stronger connection between Shimon and the woman who fell to him from Ruvain. And yet, Rabbi Shimon still says it's a suffix. So how could we in our Gemara say that Zika is for sure Zika, and it's strong enough and it's considered like she's married to Shimon to the extent that if Levi was born later, if Levi was born later, then Levi encounters that situation where that Zika is already blocking his approach because that Zika is considered to be like a marriage already. It's not true. So the Gemara wants to offer a number of attempts at an answer. The Gemara's first attempt at an answer is to say that really we hold Yesh Zika, and we hold that once Reuven falls to Yibam to Shimon, once Reuven's wife falls to Yibam to Shimon, there is a Zika and it's considered like she's married, and if Levi then shows up afterwards, even before Shimon did Yibam, that blocks Levi from getting involved because it's already considered like she's connected and married to Shimon. However, that's only Midaraisa. Midarabanan, we do not allow that. And Midarabanan, we say that it's not considered to be a full marriage, and therefore the halacha of the second wife changes. That is, Shimon's second wife changes. Midaraisa, Shimon's second wife should be completely patur. She should not have to do anything. Both women should be considered married to Shimon, and when one of them, when Shimon dies, they both fall to even from Shimon to Levi, and therefore Levi does even to one of them, and the other one goes free. That's what really should be midaraisa. However, the Rabbanon said, no, you cannot allow this because we are afraid that there could be confusion in a case where one came from Reuven and one came from Shimon, because over here the first wife was originally married to Reuven and then to Shimon. So if one came from Reuven and one came from Shimon, and they fell to Yibam at the same time, and therefore they both have an equal Yibam connection to Levi from two different homes, and it's very important here that Reuven and Shimon had died at the same time, because if Reuven died first, then Shimon had a Yibam connection to her, she would be considered to be Shimon's wife, according to what we're saying now, and they would be considered to be two wives coming from Shimon. So it's got to be that Reuven and Shimon died at the same time, but the two women are coming from two different homes. So we may learn a wrong halacha to that case, and we may paskin in that case that just like in our other case, that one woman does Yibam and the other one can go free without anything. And there it's not true because they're coming from two different homes. One is coming from Reuven, one is coming from Shimon. Therefore, Midar Rabbanan, we said even in our case, where Reuven died first, and therefore both are considered married to Shimon, and therefore when Shimon dies, Levi could do even to one of them and let the other one go free. We don't allow that because we don't want to have confusion. That's what the Gemara wants to say. So the Gemara says this cannot be the reasoning of Rabbi Shimon that does not allow the second wife to go free. It can't be because of a derabanan concern. It's got to be because of a suffix, because he said so clearly. He said that this is a suffix situation. We do not know if the marriage, if the Zika counts or not, if the Zika with the Maimer counts or not, or if the Zika alone counts or not, and therefore we don't know if they're coming from Reuven and Shimon, and therefore both are Chayev Yibam, or if they're both coming from Shimon, and there's one Yibam connection to one of the two of them. One of the two of them does Yibam, the other one goes free. He clearly says it because he doesn't know. So that cannot possibly be the reason. So the Gemara therefore needs to look for another answer, and the Gemara wants to say that there's two different types of Zika. There's a Zika that's coming to a situation where there's only one brother, and there's a Zika going to a situation where there are two brothers. And Rabbi Shimon holds as follows. If there's only one brother who's possible to do Yibam, that's a very strong Zika to him. It's not a divided Zika. And therefore, in a situation like that, we would say that she's considered to be fully married. So that's our case of the Ishes Achshel Hayabah. There you have Reuven who dies without children. Levi is not born yet. Shimon is alive. There's a strong Zika to Shimon. Therefore, they're considered to be married. If Reuven is then born, if Levi is then born, even if Shimon has not done anything yet, this woman is already considered to be married, as if it were halachically, to Shimon because of that strong Zika, and therefore Levi doesn't get involved. He doesn't have any mitzvah Yibam, and there's nothing blocking, and he does not consider to be an Ishes Achshel Hayabah, answering him on this woman should they fall to Yibam again later. Now, that's only because there was no other brother at the time that Reuven's wife fell to Yibam to Shimon. However, in the case that we brought up, where there are three brothers, and Reuven died, and his wife fell to Yibam to Shimon and to Levi, and over there we said that if Shimon were to do Maimer, Levi would have to do Yibam to one, and the other would need a potential chalitza because we don't know if the Zika counts as a marriage or not. That's because there were two brothers alive at the time that Reuven died, and that's a split Zika. A split Zika is not strong enough to make it considered like she's married to Shimon, and therefore when Shimon dies, it is a quasi, it is a suffix whether she's falling to Yibam from Reuven or she's falling to Yibam from Shimon, and therefore we cannot let the other wife off without anything. That's what the Gemara wants to say. The Gemara says the problem is that it doesn't seem to be true. It doesn't seem to be true that Rabbi Shimon holds that two brothers have a weaker zika, and that there's a difference between two brothers and one brother. And the Gemara now quotes a brisa of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon is discussing the halacha of Eishes Ach Shel Hayabal, and he says as follows. He says this is the rule. Doesn't make it different. He says this is the rule. It depends if the Yibum of Shimon happened before Levi's birth, or if Levi was born before Shimon did Yibum. Again, so we're referring to where Reuven had died without children. Shimon was the only brother alive. Shimon at some point did Yibum, and Levi was born at some point, and it makes a difference which one happened first. And he says, if the birth of Levi happened before the Yibum of Shimon, then Shimon dies. The halacha is you cannot do Yibum, you cannot do Chalitza. And the simplest explanation because it's an Eishes Ach Shel Hayabal. If, however, the Yibum of Shimon happened before the birth of Levi, then you would say that, and then Shimon, of course, died without children, and they both fell to Levi, then we could say that Levi could do either Yibum or Chalitza, and there's no problem of Eishes Ach Shel Hayabal. Now, based on what we were saying, Rabbi Shimon should be arguing, and he should be arguing on both cases, and say in both cases he could do either Yibum or Chalitza. What is the reason that over here we're saying that if Levi was born first, then he can't do Yibum or Chalitza? So Gemara says it's got to be because here we're talking about when there are two brothers. There was another brother around. Besides for Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, there was another brother existing who was out of the picture. He didn't do anything the whole time, and therefore it was a weak zika, and therefore it wasn't considered like Reuven's wife was married to Shimon from the moment that she fell to Yibum, and therefore Levi, when he's born, comes onto the scene when there is no marriage connection. There is no zika connection that's very strong that blocks him out between the woman and Shimon, and therefore there is a zika to Levi as well, and that zika is frustrated by the fact that Levi is an Eishes Ach Shel Hayabal, and that creates an Isser, and that's why when Shimon dies he cannot do Yibum or Chalitza. That's what you have to say. So the Gemara says the problem is that this can't be true. It can't be true because if you look carefully at what Rabbi Shimon said that this is the rule. And he split between which one was born first. That he said one case where they could do Yibum and Chalitza, one case where they can't do Yibum and Chalitza, and the case where he said that you cannot do Yibum and Chalitza is dependent on which one happened first, the birth or the Yibum of Shimon. If what you're saying is true, that it makes a difference whether there was another brother or not, let him just differentiate between whether there was another brother or not. That should make the difference as to whether he's allowed to do Yibum and Chalitza or not. So the Gemara says, it's not any better to differentiate that way or to differentiate this way. We would rather talk about the case where there was only one brother, and then we said that the split is between whether he did Yibum first or the birth of Levi happened first, and that's why we want to split it up that way. It's not any more closely related between the two cases if we were to split between whether there was another brother in existence or not another brother in existence. But the problem is that he says this is the rule. This is the rule. This is the rule implies that this applies in all cases, and it doesn't make a difference how many brothers there were. Also, we have another problem, and another problem is from another brisa which we have, where Rav Shimon seems to say otherwise. Now the Gemara is going to quote this brisa and go at length into this brisa, which again seems to show again that Rav Shimon does not hold of the rule of Yesh Zika. And this brisa says as follows: you have three brothers. Two of them are married to two women, meaning each one is married to a woman, and these two women are related. There's four different possibilities of how they are related. Either they are sisters, or it's a mother and a daughter, or a mother and a granddaughter. Two types of a granddaughter through a son, or granddaughter through a daughter, meaning a mother and her daughter's daughter, or a mother and her son's daughter. These are four relationships in which nobody could marry both of them. So you have these two women that are married to Reuven and Shimon, and then Reuven and Shimon die, and they both fall to Yibum to Levi. So what is the halacha over here? So the Tanna Kamma says they both require Chalitza and not Yibum, because both of them are a tzaras erva with Zika. That is, they have to do Chalitza and not Yibum. Now, Rabbi Shimon says otherwise. Rabbi Shimon says neither of them could do Yibum or Chalitza. They don't have to do anything. They go off scot-free. So now, the problem is as follows. If Rabbi Shimon holds that there is a Zika, So then why do they go off scot-free? One of them should be able to do Yibum, and the second one, that one goes off scot-free. Now, the explanation is as follows. The Tanakama is holding that the third brother, Levi, cannot do Yibum with either of them because each one is a Krovas Zekukaso. She's the sister, or the grandmother, or the granddaughter, or the mother, or the daughter of the other woman who is this person's Zekuka, and therefore it's forbidden to him to do Yibum with any of them. Rabbi Shimon, though, is saying, and she doesn't need anything. However, if Rabbi Shimon really held that the Zika was so strong that it's considered like they're married, so then that woman's already considered to be married, and only the other one is a Krovas Zekukaso. Meaning, whichever one of the brothers died first, that's the one whose wife he should marry, because that was the one who was first had a Zika to him. And when the second one, when he died and his wife fell, she was coming as a Krovas Skukaso. The first instant that the first one had died, there's already a strong Zika. It's considered like married, and whoever comes afterwards, that's a Krovas Skukaso. So you should do Yibum to the first one. She has no Isser, and her Zika blocks any other problems from being created afterwards because she's considered already connected and married to Shimon. Obviously, then Rabbi Shimon does not hold that Yesh Zika is so strong that it can block other relationships and Isurim from being created afterwards. That's the Gemara's Kasha. Now the Gemara is going to try a couple of ways to answer this. So the Gemara first says, what does it mean when Rabbi Shimon says that she gets off scot-free? It doesn't mean that they both get off scot-free. It means the second one gets off scot-free. And that's true, just like you're saying. The first one does Yibum because she had the original Zika, which is as strong as if they were married. The second one gets off scot-free because she's a Krovas Skukasa already at the time she fell to Yibum. Now the Gemara's problem with this is that we have another brisa that says over the same thing, and it says that Rabbi Shimon paters both of them. Doesn't pater just one of them. So that can't be correct. So the Gemara says no. Rava says no. Pater both of them means that there's two sets of related sisters both falling to Yibum, and he's patering one from each set. Meaning Rava's understanding that when we had the four cases listed in the Mishnah, that the two brothers were married to sisters, to a mother and a daughter, to a mother and a granddaughter, to a mother and a granddaughter, all four happened at the same time. Ruvain was married to Rachel, Leah, Bilhah, Zilpah, and Shimon was married to Rachel's sister, Leah's daughter, Bilhah's granddaughter through a son, and Zilpah's granddaughter through a daughter. So all four cases happened. And therefore, when Ruvain died, all four women fell to Yibum, and Rabbi Shimon is paskin, according to a Rava wants to understand, all four could have the same Yibum obligation. He obviously only does Yibum to one of them because you can only do one from the four. And then that paters all of them. And then all of the ones in the second marriage, when the second brother falls to Yibum, they're all pater as well because they are all taros. For the one that is freed because of achos skukaso. Now, the Gemara says Rava made a mistake over here. Rava didn't understand the case correctly. First of all, it's not all four cases happening at once, and therefore you cannot say that when he paters both of them, he means all, that one from each pair. You got to say that, first of all, because it says or. It says sisters or mother-daughter or mother-granddaughter. It's not all happening at once. Second of all, if he wants to learn that all four of them happening at once, then it should say that he paters one from each of the four sets. Shouldn't say that he paters one of each of the two sets, because there are four cases that are listed. So either way, is can be pshat in Reb Shimon the way you want to explain it. Next problem is that Rabbi Shimon, we have another brisa where he says that the reason that they are pater is because of the pasuk that says Isha lachosa lo sikach litzrar, and that says you cannot marry a woman and her sister at a time when they become tsaros to each other. That means when you have a situation where two women are falling to you to Yibum, they're becoming tsaros together, they're falling in a tsaros type of situation. Both sisters are falling to Yibum to you. You can't do Yibum to either of them, especially because there is a kasav that when two sisters fall to Yibum, you can't do Yibum to either of them. Not just because of achos skukasu, but because of that pasuk there. So anyway, so you see clearly that it has enough that it's not that it's one of each of the sets. So the Gemara therefore gives another answer, and the Gemara says that over here, what's happening is that both Reuven and Shimon died at the same time, and therefore both women are falling to Yibum at the same time. Really, you could say that Rabbi Shimon does hold of Yesh Zika, and whichever one would die first would have a strong Zika, and that would block the other one from creating any Yisr. However, they both died at the same time. Now, the exact same time, that's a chiddush. To say that both brothers died at the exact same time, it shouldn't have to be off by a tiny fraction. The Gemara says that Rosh Hashanah holds like a basic Gili, who says it is possible for two things to happen at exactly the same time. He is talking in the case of a Bukhar, where two animals were born at the same time, and both should theoretically be the Bukhar, both should be the firstborn. According to the Chachamim, you say that one of them had to be first, and I don't know which one because I can't tell, but it couldn't possibly be at the exact same time, and therefore they would each have the halachas of a Safek Bukhar. According to Rabbi Gamliel, they're both a Bukhar because they are possibly, if you see them both born at the same time, they're both born at the same time. Here also Rabbi Shimon is holding that both could have been falling to Yibam at the same instant, and therefore both of them are considered to be a full-fledged Zika, and neither of them blocks the other ones, and both are Achos Zkukaso, and that's why he holds that they're both Pater without having anything. Now this is all in Rav Oshi's understanding of Rabbi Shimon, that Rabbi Shimon argues in both cases, both whether Levi was born before the Yibam of Shimon or whether Shimon was born before the Yibam of Levi. Now the Gemara quotes Rav Papa. Rav Papa says otherwise. Rav Papa says no. Rav Shimon only argues in the second case. He only argues and says that Levi is mutter in the case where Levi was born after Shimon went and did Yibam. As in the regular case of Achos of Eishes Achshal Hoya Ba'olamo, Rav Papa understands that Rav Shimon says if Levi, that is, was born after Shimon did Yibam, Levi doesn't come into a situation where there's any Yibam Zika, and therefore he doesn't become an Eishes Achshal Hoya Ba'olamo. If, however, Levi would have been born before Shimon's Yibam, then Levi would come into a situation of Zika, and that would be frustrated by the fact that he's an Eishes Achshal Hoya Ba'olamo, and that would create an Isser. And therefore, Rabbi Shimon would not argue in that case. He would agree to the Chachamim in that case. Says the Gemara, if so, why do I need both Mishnayos? Why do I need the first Mishnah which discusses where Levi was born before the Yibam, as well as the second Mishnah where Levi was born after the Yibam? If Shimon only argues in the second case, what is the point in saying both cases? The Gemara says it is for the Chachamim. The first case where he was born before the Yibam, the Chachamim is less of a Chiddush, because there they say that he came in a situation where there was a Zika and he's Aser. And then the Chacham goes a step further and they say not only that, but even in the case where he was born after the Yibam and he came in a situation where there was no Zika, he's still Aser. Now the Gemara says we have a Brisa which explicitly shows, like Rav Papa, that Rabbi Shimon only argues in the case where he was born after the Zika ended, but if he was born when the Zika was still around, he would agree that his Eishes Achshal Hoya Ba'olamo and his Aser. It's a lengthy brisa. We'll break it up into pieces and show one step where Rabbi Shimon clearly holds, like Rav Papa says he does. However, along the way we're going to explain it according to Rav Papa's approach, since that's what we're going to end up with in the end. So the brisa begins as follows. First case in the Brisa is we have two brothers, Reuven and Shimon, and Reuven is married to a woman, he dies without children. That woman falls to even to Shimon, who has his own wife. Shimon plans on doing Maimer, but he doesn't end up doing Maimer. The Gemara points out later, what do we say that he plans on doing Maimer and he doesn't end up doing Maimer? It does say he didn't do Maimer. The Gemara says no, plans meaning that he planned on doing it Bal Korchoi. He planned on doing it with her agreement, and he wasn't able to do it with her agreement. He was only able to do it against her will. The Gemara says that that'll show that that's not like the opinion of Rebbe, who says that he is allowed, that he's not allowed to, that if Rebbe holds that Maimer can be done against one's will. We'll see that Gemara later. So here, for the meantime, the Gemara says that he didn't do Maimer, and Levi was born before he did Maimer. So the halach over here says the Tanakama is that once Shimon dies, two women fall to Yibam. The first one is Reuven's wife, who's falling to Levi. She's also as an Eishes Achshal Hoya Ba'olamo. She was never had any connection to Shimon. The second wife, who's Shimon's wife, is falling to him. She is a regular woman. She could get either Chalitza or Yibam. She has no relationship to the Eishes Achshal Hoya Ba'olamo. Now, what happens if he did do Maimer? What happens if Shimon did do Maimer? So the Tanakama says it doesn't matter whether he did Maimer before Levi was born or did Maimer after Levi was born. Either way, the halacha is that that woman is an Eishes Achshal Hoya Ba'olamo, and therefore she goes free. The second one can do Chalitza and not Yibam because there's a quasi connection. There is a Maimer connection, and she is a Tzaras Maimer of an Isach Shal Ba'olamo. Not sure if she's putter or not, and therefore she has to have she's quasi putter, and therefore she has to have a chalitza, and she cannot have a yibum. Now, Rabbi Shimon adds a halacha over here, which the Gemara requires some explanation. What it comes out is as follows. He says, if Levi then gets up, and he does either yibum or chalitza with Shimon's original wife, not the one who fell to him from yibum from Reuven, then that would leave Reuven's original wife putter without requiring any yibum or chalitza. And the reason is because the maimer that Shimon did is a suffix, whether it's a complete marriage or it's a zero. We don't hold it it's quasi. According to Rabbi Shimon, it's either complete or zero, as we saw earlier in the daf, and therefore either way everything works out. Why? Because if that marriage is a zero, that means that there is no connection between Shimon and Reuven's original wife. Reuven's original wife falls to Yibam from Reuven directly to Levi, and she's an Eshes Ach Shel Hoya Ba'olamo, and therefore she's putter from everything. Therefore, the fact that he did chalitza to Shimon's original wife doesn't help Reuven's wife, doesn't make any difference, and she still has to have either, she would have to have even more chalitza, but she's pater because she's an Eshes Ach Shel Hoya Ba'olamo. Now, if, however, Shimon's maimer was a complete marriage, then both of them are falling to Levi from Shimon, and they are two tzaros, and therefore the fact that he did even more chalitza to Shimon's original wife paters her anyway. Now that's true, again, only if he does Yibum or Chalitza to Shimon's original wife. If he would do Yibum or Chalitza to Reuven's original wife, who did Maimer, that would not help things for Shimon's other original wife, because on the tzad that his Maimer was nothing, that Yibum or Chalitza only worked for Reuven's wife, and she was totally independent of Shimon's wife, and she would still require Yibum or Chalitza, and since we wouldn't know, she would still require Chalitza. This is all the first half of that brisa, which we've explained according to the understanding that Rabbi Shimon holds like Rav Papa. The second half is what really gives it away. The Sefer over here discusses three things that happened. Shimon did Yibum, Shimon died, and Levi was born. And it discusses where the birth of Levi falls in relation to the Yibum of Shimon and the death of Shimon. And it says three cases. So as follows. If Levi was born first, before Shimon did either Yibum or married, or if Levi was born last, after Shimon did Yibum and Shimon died, then in either of those cases the halacha would be that there was no chiyuv Yibum or chalitza, and that everybody agrees to. Why? Because if Shimon did Yibum and he died, and Levi hasn't been born yet, then Levi's an Eshes Ach Shel Hoya Ba'olamo to Shimon and to Reuven, and therefore the woman who's falling to him to Yibum is completely aser. There's no Yibum or Chalitza altogether. If Levi was born before the Yibum, then Levi's coming into a situation where everybody agrees there's a Zika, and that Zika can't be done because he's an Eshes Ach Shel Hoya Ba'olamo of Reuven, who's the original Yibum, and therefore there's no Yibum or Chalitza to him at all. Now, where is there machlokes? This brisa clearly says that's in the situation where Shimon does Yibum, then Levi's born. According to the Tanakama, he's an Eshes Ach Shel Hoya Ba'olamo. According to Reb Shimon, he's not an Eshes Ach Shel Hoya Ba'olamo because he's coming to a situation where there's no Zika anymore. If then Shimon were to die, and Shimon's wife and Reuven's original wife would fall to Yibum too, Levi, then you would have a machlokes between Rav Shimon and the Tanakama. Now this case is set aside from the other two, clearly to show that Rav Shimon argues in this case only, not in the previous case, the Gemara says, because according to the Tanakama, which the Gemara identifies as Rabbi Meir, all the cases have the same halacha, all of them are usher, and you would just put them all together. The fact that it's listed separately shows that Rav Shimon argues only in this case and not in any other case, and that's why it's set apart. The Gemara now goes into the machlokes between Rabbi and the Chachamim as to whether Maimer works against the will of the Yevama or not. According to Rabbi, it does, because we put Maimer together with Yibum, just like Yibum works B'al Karcha. Maimer was a type of Yibum, works B'al Karcha as well. According to the Chachamim, Maimer is a Kiddushin, and just like Kiddushin doesn't work B'al Karcha, we put it together with other Kiddushins which don't work B'al Karcha, and therefore Maimer, which is a type of Kiddushin, doesn't work B'al Karcha as well. The Gemara asks, why doesn't each one hold at the other one? The Gemara holds that each one says you put Kiddushins together, and Rabbi says you put Yibum halachos together. The Gemara now just fills in and explains the line in the beginning of the brisa, which according to Rav Shimon, which we explained already, the Gemara says that where Rav Shimon said that Chalitza would not work is Chalitza to the Balas Maimer, that is the woman who was Reuven's wife, who fell to Shimon, and then Shimon did Maimer. if Levi were to go do chalitza to her, that would not have any effect on the tzara, on Shimon's original wife. It's talking about, the Gemara explains, where Levi was born after the mimer, and therefore if the mimer counts as a full marriage, Levi is, according to Rabbi Shimon's opinion, not asur as Eishes Ach Shel Hayu Ba'olamo. It's only in the case where he were to do chalitza to the Baal's mimer that it would not affect the tzara, because the tzara is for sure chayev to him in Yibum. She fell from Shimon. Doesn't matter if mimer was a good, valid marriage or not, she's certainly falling from Shimon to him directly with no other issues, and therefore she's certainly chayev to him. That chalitza that he did to the Baal's mimer is questionable whether it happened, whether it was worth anything or not. If the mimer counted, then she fell to Yibum from Shimon, and it did count and pottered the tzara. But if it didn't count because she came from Ruvain, if it didn't count, then she was falling to him from Ruvain, then it would not help anything because he's an Eish Shel Hayu to Ruvain, and therefore it would not pater the tzara. Therefore the tzara is chayiv anyway, and she has to do at least chalitza.